but here we are.
Thanks, everybody, and welcome to the Rocha Revolution. We're getting started with my good friend Mayra, who is calling in. I'm assuming you're in Chicago?
I am.
I knew you may be on the road. That's why I was asking. She lives in Chicago. I'm not asking that like she don't live there. To be clear, you've lived there. You were born and raised there. We're going to get to that. But tell everybody who you are and tell them the office that you're running for, because you should know, let me interrupt and say that we have had shit. I bet we've had 10 Latino candidates on in the last 10 weeks. Mayra, you'd be so happy with your work you've done in your prior iteration of your life with Latinos running for office in Texas for Congress, in Arizona, in New Mexico, in California. Get this, Michigan and New Hampshire.
Midwest. With
Yes,
um,
all of those. Tell us about what you're doing and where you're running for office at. Dog catcher for the city of Chicago.
oh my gosh, that is incredible. Thank you, Chuck, for using your voice and platform to uplift Latino candidates all over the country. My name is Mayra Macias. I am running for Illinois' 4th congressional district, which encompasses the southwest side of Chicago and the western suburbs. It is the most Latino district in the state of Illinois. So I'm very excited. And more than anything, it is the district that raised me. I was born and raised in Back of the Yards, which is a working class Mexican immigrant community. I am a former educator. I taught middle school English, former organizer, coalition builder, who is running for office to make sure that voters have a choice because the current incumbent is retiring and unfortunately didn't tell folks he was retiring until after the Democratic filing deadline. So, part of what makes this race so interesting is I'm actually running as an independent. And I want to make sure that folks have a choice in the November ballot. Unfortunately, we already had primaries here, and there was only one candidate on the Democratic ticket. But we're still working hard to make we get on the ballot. So very excited to be here and talk about more of my platform and why I'm running.
Mara, is there, we know that the incumbent now has retired. He had anointed his chief of staff at the last minute. Nobody else really filed to run, hence how this all went down. But is there a Republican running?
There is a Republican who is running. I believe this is the second or third election in which she has run. The district is very Democratic. It's a D+17 district. So usually, I mean, a Republican it doesn't really stand a chance. But they will, get a good 20% of the electorate, which are the registered Republicans.
Tell my listeners about uh, your family's journey to Chicago. A lot of folks who've listened to the Latino Vote podcast or the Rocha Revolution, we've talked about this great migration back in the day of Hispanics, mainly Mexican Americans, from a lot from the Texas Valley, from different parts of Mexico, who went to Detroit and Michigan for the auto industry. A lot of folks went to Chicago, Gary, Northern Indiana for the steel industry. Lots of other Latinos migrated. Is your family story intertwined in all of that?
Somewhat. So, both my parents are from Guanajuato, which is a state in the central part of Mexico, and it is a part of Mexico that um, there are a lot of folks from that part of Mexico that came to Chicago in service of the railroad industry. When railroad expansion was happening in the Midwest, a lot of labor was coming from Mexico. My family did not come for the railroads, but one person comes here and then they tell the rest of us. So I often joke that of all the warm places my family could have picked to move to, they chose the Windy City. And my father was actually, coming here pretty young. Like he started coming to work in the States at the age of 18, would go back and forth between Mexico and the US. His sisters both settled here in Chicago. And so when my father married my mother, they were coming to the US to work, save up so they could build their home in Mexico. So they came here to Chicago and ended up falling in love with the city and staying and building a family here. So There are a lot of folks from Guanajuato, a lot of folks from, neighboring Zacatecas that did come initially for the railroad industry. The area I grew up in, back of the yards, is actually known because it is the meat packing part of the city. So a lot of immigrants, whether they were initially from, Lithuania, Poland, were coming and settling there, and eventually, Mexicans came and were also doing that work, and, um, the community I'm from is very immigrant, but it has transitioned from Lithuanian, Polish immigrants to, now heavily Mexican immigrants, and we have a little bit of all, Latino immigrants in that area.
Where is back of the yards in conjunction with I've heard a lot of people, including my outlaw buddy, Jorge Neri, who talks about Little Village. Where's Little Village?
Okay, so Little Village, known as Little Mexico here, um, in the heart of the 4th Congressional District. It is such a rich community of, Mexican immigrants, first, second, third generation Mexican Americans. What is incredible about Little Village is that there is this 2-mile stretch on, it's called La 26, 26th Street, that is full of small businesses. It's about 500 small businesses. And each year, these small businesses generate about $900 million in sales, which only rivals in Chicago, Michigan Avenue, also known as a Magnificent Mile, which, boasts the luxury brand designer stores. And it is incredible and a testament to the entrepreneurial spirit of the Mexican American community that second, in sales is the heart of Little Village. A lot of family-owned businesses, a lot of small businesses who are pouring back into the community. So a lot of folks from the 4th Congressional District, a lot of Mexicans have ties to Little Village. I'm not from there. I do have family in Little Village. I grew up going to Little Village. It's where you went to feel like you were back home. And I wanna, talk a little bit about the moment we're in because Chicago went through, very, very terrible dystopian time, with Operation Midway Blitz. So, we had ICE here coming to our communities, including Little Village. Folks, were in unmarked cars, they were masked, no judicial warrants most of the time, just profiling people on the streets, and Little Village, as a result, has really suffered both in terms of folks just, being traumatized that government was weaponized against them, but when you're thinking of the small business sector that generates so much in sales that's pouring back into the community, folks are still small business owners are still reeling from that impact. I've talked to business owners who are talking about how it's worse than COVID. And at least during COVID, there was some sort of federal relief, some hope in sight. And I bring this up because a lot of, that money then pours back into the community for programs, for churches, for um, a support system. And we're seeing a lot of these small businesses struggle to remain afloat, and people are still afraid to go out with their families, on the weekends, shop or go to a restaurant. The impacts of ICE in our community are real. They are both, you know, traumatic from a humanitarian standpoint, but also from an economic standpoint. We're still
Cool. Can you still hear me okay?
yes, I can.
Okay, good. I wanna ask you about a couple more things. First of all, folks, you say there's a lot of things that tie me and Mayra together, one of which is my grandfather and my grandmother both were born in Guanajuato and immigrated to East Texas from Guanajuato. I was just talking to my nephew about this, who's all on Ancestry, going back and looking at my grandfather, who was Pete Rocha, and his father, who was Benito, both from Guanajuato. And I have never been, and I want to go. And me and my sister have made like a pact that we want to go there. I travel more now. We want to do that piece. And my grandfather worked on the railroad. That's where he'd saved up the money to buy this little 30 acres that was the Rocha farm where he raised 15 kids. I was looking on Ancestry 2 nights ago, and my grandmother, starting, my God, like in 1925, had a kid every year for 16 years. But anyway, it's a story for another day. Crazy what our families went through for us all to be here. Um, Now, this is a really unique situation, y'all, and I want you to pay attention. Most of you are political nerds like me and Myra, so stay with me here. She keeps talking about running to give people a choice. She keeps talking about running in a race against a Democrat and an independent. Y'all should know that Myra worked for Joe Biden. You should know that she's worked for lots of Democratic nonprofits. She's worked for the Florida Democratic Party. She's been and is a Democrat. Myra's running because she thinks the folks of this district, I'm going to let her talk about this. This is my words. I'll never try to speak for her. To give folks a chance to elect who they want, who the community wants. So she is running as an independent but is a Democrat, and she's very open about her stances and views, and she's from this community. So I think that it's something really unique at a moment in time when she talks about a community that's been terrorized by ICE, a community that's probably felt the economic downturn and the increase of gas prices, utility prices, everyday meat and groceries, which have over affected our community, to give them a voice. Me and Mayra did some work when we were working on building back together with Biden and trying to get that message out to folks about opportunity and wanting more from your government. Tell the folks as you're walking around these neighborhoods, when you're having to explain to them that you're running in this open seat, the incumbent is gone. There's a Democrat and Republican. What are the issues as you're in community, at the doors, at the flea market that folks are talking about are most important to them?
Yeah, I wanna share, anecdotes. One is to your original, point about me running to give voters a choice. So, as I mentioned, I'm from this community called Back of the Yards, very working class. I was talking to a young woman, Latina, in her 20s, who, likes the current congressman. She's a fan of Chuy Garcia, and I asked her, "What do you think about, what happened, with the congressman announcing that he was stepping down?" And she told me, "I don't even know, why I'm gonna vote because my vote doesn't matter. My decision was made for me." And she was referring to the fact that up until that point, there was only one candidate on the Democratic ticket, one candidate that was, democratically aligned, and it was heartbreaking to hear someone from my community, young person, talk about feeling franchised. And I've spent my career working to empower voters, specifically Latino voters, and to see that someone from my own community in a blue city, in a blue state, felt like they were disenfranchised was that final push that I needed to decide to jump in. And part of the process of running as an independent is that we have to talk to thousands of voters. In order to get on the ballot, I have to collect at least 10,816 signatures. And
Wow.
just to give you a barometer, I mean, those are the numbers that US Senate candidates have to get, and they're collecting statewide, and we're just collecting in our district. If I had run in the primary, had I known, it was gonna be an open seat, the required numbers is around 700. So you go from requiring less than 1,000 for a Democratic candidate to 15 times that amount for an independent. And it's Chicago, so we know we're gonna get challenged. So we are trying to get the maximum amount of signatures that we're allowed, which is 17,000. And in doing that, we've already knocked on 30,000 doors. So we've had a lot of conversations. And the thing that is very noticeable to me is when I first started collecting signatures, I would ask folks, what's the issue that's top of mind for you? Or what's the issue that you want your future member of Congress to fight for? And folks are so overwhelmed that they cannot point to one thing. It's everything. It is everything. It's like you said, the cost. I get healthcare a lot, and not just people saying, like, I can't afford healthcare. People showing me pictures, tell me stories of having to fly to Mexico because it was cheaper to buy a flight from Chicago to Mexico, get healthcare there, than to go to a hospital here with health insurance to go to their primary care provider and get the services they needed. And the feeling of just like being overwhelmed is so palpable when you're talking to voters. What I think has also stood up the most in terms of it is really this lack of belief that government can do anything for people. And I've had many a conversation with folks where I'm like, can you help me get on the ballot? I need to collect over 10,000 signatures. And their response is, I mean, why? Nothing's going to change. And it's not just about Republicans, right? They're talking about not feeling faith in either party at this point, not feeling like these institutions are there for working class people. And so when I'm talking about the issues I'm fighting for, to our affordability, advancing our immigration platform, which includes abolishing ICE, which includes holding ICE agents accountable for the damages they've done in our communities and strengthening our democracy, I'm wanting also underline all that to like give people hope because at the end of the day, this government is for the people, by the people, and if people don't believe that government can serve them, there's so little we can do in terms of, like, the tangible issues, like, they need to believe that folks are fighting for them, that their elected officials are fighting for them, and that they care and they see what they're going through. So those are some of the conversations we've had. Again, we've talked to thousands of voters at this point already, and it's inspiring to see people feel give themselves permission to have hope, right? To see like this is something different. I want to at least try to make a change, and so they're willing to give us their signature, which I respect and am so grateful for, especially when folks have lost faith.
I think that's really important. Before we go any further, can you tell folks where they could go to donate to your campaign and find out more information?
Yeah, so you can go to voteformyra.com. As I mentioned, we are in the final stretch. We have to submit our signatures in less than 2 weeks. So if you're in the Chicagoland area and want to come knock on some doors, we are knocking every day in the evening, all day on the weekend. So you can sign up online at my website. You can also visit me on all the social media platforms. My handle is usually Vote for Myra. And if you are unable to join us but want to support, I'm trying to raise an additional $10,000 between now and when we submit our petitions, because I have no doubt that our signatures are going to be challenged. So I want to make sure that we have the resources to fight back and ensure that after talking to thousands of voters, after collecting thousands of signatures, that there is no chance that we get kicked off the ballot.
I think that this year is really unique in amazing people like you that are running, and let me make my case. Um, Amazing to me is regular folks. There's a lot we're used to the doctors running. We're used to the town lawyer running. We're used to the guy who owns the factory running because they have the infrastructure of fundraising to be able to go. They don't have to really work. Their mom and daddy probably left them some money. They're a little bit of a nepo, this and that. So good for all those folks. But that's the reason regular folks don't normally seek these kind of offices because it's hard to do what you described, Myra. And I think for folks that are listening and they can tell by looking at your young face that you ain't no old lady, that you're a young lady, they probably want to know, what did you do to get your path to being where you can run for Congress at such a young age and be very qualified to be a congresswoman? I know that, but I'm one of your best friends. But for those that are listening, you talked about being a school teacher. You talked about Teach for America. You talked about doing work in the nonprofit space. Kind of walk us through a little bit of the resume that will tell other folks, because we always think as regular working class Mexicans, me and you, that's not what we do. We don't run for Congress. We work, right? We got calluses on our hands. We're going to get it. We're going to be the doers behind the scenes, and that's what you were forever. So what took you the steps to that way?
Uh, and before I answer that, I just want to second everything you said. I mean, I can't have a job and do this full time. And so I see the way that it's very easy if you come from wealth to make this decision because at the end of the day, like, it is I don't see how people with regular 9 to 5 jobs are able to run full-time for Congress, or parents who have to raise kids have the flexibility to drop whatever they're doing and collect thousands of signatures or raise money. So, it is a system that is, prohibitive for working class people, for parents, and we need to change that because that's why we don't have policies that center those needs. In terms of, my path here, so as I mentioned, I started in the classroom, and I always center it there because I would not be working in politics had I teacher. It was my time in the classroom that made me realize all the way that policy impacts a kid's ability to just come in and learn. And so during my time in the classroom, Miami, Florida. I was finishing my 2nd year teaching, and we had a big election coming up. It was 2012, and President Barack Obama was up for reelection. And I remember feeling very compelled to do everything I could to make sure that we reelected him because, again, I'm seeing firsthand what it looks like to work in a low resource school where I had to spend my money and my weekends making photocopies out of my own pocket to make sure my students had worksheets they could write on. So I was gonna take a quick little detour from teaching, became an organizer, working in Little Havana, and I fell in love with organizing. Again, this detour ended up becoming the start of a career in politics. After that, I worked for the Florida Democratic Party, doing Latino engagement, eventually, working my way up to uh, deputy political director, helping recruit candidates. You're talking about moms, teachers, just, everyday people who care about their communities and helping support them at the did a stint on the Hill. I worked on the Hill for a year for Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro. And I probably honestly would have stayed on the government side had Donald Trump not become the presumptive nominee. When that happened, I decided to go back to Florida because I could not let this man become president. And I came back to the Florida Democratic Party as the political director for the state party. As you all know, we did not win that election. So I stayed in Florida helping rebuild the party, and then eventually in 2017, went back to DC where I began working at Latino Victory. First as a political director, where I first met Chuck, and we collaborated on a ton of races supporting progressive Latino candidates all over the country. But eventually, I ran the organization for the last 2 years that I was there. And it was one of the most, rewarding jobs that I've had because you get to see how when you elect people like us, the that they make on people's everyday quality of lives, the voices that they bring into the room. I always talk about Veronica Escobar and Sylvia Garcia. As a Texan, Chuck did not have a Mexican American woman representing his state until 2018. A state that was
We
once
kept them out as long as possible.
I mean, Lord, a state that was once Mexico didn't have representing until very recently. So that's the type of work that has moved me. It's about impact and getting the right people in the room. And then for the last 4 years, I was working and eventually running this organization called Building Back Together that served as a bridge between the White House and national and state partners who were doing the work of trying to get as much progressive policy passed under the Biden Harris administration. And part of the work that Chuck and I got to do was once we passed as much legislation as possible, including legislation that helped cap insulin to $35 a month or invested uh, trillions of dollars in our infrastructure. 17 billion came to Illinois to update roads and bridges, to invest in our water systems, which is a huge problem in our district, and upgrade our public transportation system. And so I did that for the last 4 years, and have this whole time have been wanting to make my way back home. So my last job prior to running, as I was, working on the Harris campaign. And once we lost that election, went back to the station, and closed it down, and home, because it'd been a while. I had, you miss a lot of family moments when you were in this work, and so it felt good to be back. Unfortunately, while I was here, as I mentioned, ICE was everywhere, in the community where I grew up in Little Village and the surrounding areas, and it really reminded me of the power that I had to bridge the national resources and networks that I have to raise money to support our community here. And that's, part of why I'm running as well, to make sure that the relationships and the work that I've done at the national level have been in service of my family, of the people that I grew up with, of the people, in back of the yards who, are just trying to make ends meet in this economy. And when things feel so bleak, trying to make sure that folks know their power. And part of it is just getting out and voting, making sure we have the right folks in the room fighting for them.
This district, I'm curious about the campaign strategy. Again, for the folks listening, I know they're a bunch of nerds, so they get this. So stay with me here. Is that about 65% of the registered folks in this CD are Democrat or Democrat leaning or independents that look like Democrats? And there's 35% that are Republicans. You're running as an independent against a Democrat, against a Republican. You just described all this amazing work you've done for Democrats. When you meet somebody at the door, do you go, I'm a Democrat running as an independent so that folks have a choice because wasn't afforded the chance to even be on the Democratic because of the way this shit went down? Is that your wording to them?
Sometimes, oftentimes it's, hi, I'm Myra. I'm running for Congress. I need, X number of signatures to get on the ballot. And then people ask, the follow-up question is, well, what party are you? But sometimes they'll say, are you a Democrat? At which point I say, I am a Democrat, but I'm running as an independent, and here's why.
Oh,
And
great.
and honestly, a lot of a lot of people are tracking this race. Like, I have had so many conversations with folks where I say, like, hey, my name's Myra. I'm running, in this seat, and, I need X number of signatures to get on the ballot. Will you support me? And folks will say, are you the person that Congressman Garcia tried to put in?
Oh, shit.
I had one woman, I will never forget this. I and I, I sometimes people ask me why I'm running, so I'll talk about my, three main policy platforms. And this woman was like, "Hold on, I need to check something." Pulls out her phone and she's just Googling away. And I'm like, "Well, ma'am, is there something I can answer for you?" I start talking about, like, I'm not taking corporate PAC money. I'm not taking APAC money. I support abolishing like, I just name the thing. She finally is like, "Okay, I'm good." Signs my petition. And then I ask her out of curiosity, "What were you searching for?" And she said, "I just wanted to make sure that you weren't Chewy's chief."
Oh, damn.
So people are following this. I mean, in this day and age when we're talking about democracy barely surviving under the Trump administration, when voting rights are under attack by the Supreme Court, someone's ability to choose who's going to fight for them, who's going to represent them in Congress is is a big deal to voters. I mean, they are upset. And this happened 6 months ago now, and folks are still talking about it, and it oftentimes, like I said, organically comes up where people just wanna clarify, "Are you the person?" And I think that is very telling of the moment we're in, where folks want to make sure that they're fighting for their rights, that they are not being told who they should support or who's gonna represent them, and it's an opportunity for us to make our case.
There are two Latino seats in Chicago. You should know this is one of them, currently held by Chuy Garcia, who's retiring. Uh, there is another one by Delia Ramirez. Does Delia's district touch your district?
So there once upon a time, this was one district, it was like the super Latino district,
And
and
was this the one that Luis had?
was the district that, Congressman Luis Gutierrez had, and it held the, Latino northern part of the city, which is heavily Puerto Rican, and then the, Latino southern part, which is heavily Mexican. So they were split into 2, and they're like, some of the parts are almost, like, adjacent because even though our district on the Chicago side is south, on the suburb side, we go all the way north basically to O'Hare, but we don't have O'Hare. It is they're they call it the earmuffs, this district. It is, very interestingly, drafted. So they're, like, adjacent, but, separate.
The last 3 questions, the last 2 are fun. This one is still kind of fun. When if when you get to Congress, not if, but when you get to Congress, there's lots of amazing people. I won't even say women, I won't even say Latinas. But you have dealt with Congress. You have been in Congress. You know the difference between AOC and Vicente Gonzalez, both Latinos, but very different.
Correct.
Who, and not of those 2, but who do you see in Congress would be somebody you would think about modeling your, how about this question? Modeling your congressional career after? Who is somebody you look up to, somebody who you've looked at, you align policy-wise, or maybe you think they got a great pair of shoes?
Yeah, wow, this is a great question.
Thank you so much.
I mean, I will say, one person that comes to mind is Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez.
Ooh,
She is the first Puerto Rican woman in Congress, has been a trailblazer, and very much, like, always has a great pulse on the community. I think she is someone when you were thinking about ideology, I consider myself a progressive, but I also consider myself someone who gets things done. And I think she's someone who has been able to uphold her, ideological values while still delivering for her district. And, sometimes you have to work with people that you don't ideologically align with, but at the end of the day, you have to do what's best to ensure that you're delivering for the people who voted for you to fight for them. And so she is someone that I have admired, for a long time. She also endorsed our campaign, and has been, extremely helpful in guiding us, through this process. So I definitely, and she's retired. Fortunately, wouldn't get to serve with her, but just, happy to learn from her and follow in.
Congress is changing so much. There's going to be so many new members in Congress. Hat tip, literally, to our girl Anna Lilia Mejia over in New Jersey. So happy to see her. I cannot think of how y'all are gonna fuck with people if you and Anna Lily are both in Congress at the same time. Like, I don't think they're ready for y'all, just so we're all clear.
There's so many open seats, because there have been a lot of folks, retiring, not seeking reelection. And so I think that this country is ready for new leadership. And I'm excited to see how the dynamics shift with so many new faces who are, who are tired of waiting for change.
I heard that. Last 2 questions really quick and really easy. The go-to is food and music. We'll do food first. I talk to folks about the meal, their mother, their grandmother, the one meal as you're growing up that you look forward to having. It's easy to say what's your favorite meal, but I want you to go back and think about that meal, the one, your abuela made. Like, what is the one you really miss?
Well, I don't miss it because I'm here.
You still get it. Now you moved home to get it. You missed it for 20 years when you was on the damn road.
I get it. I love enchiladas. There is, especially in Guanajuato, there are a special type of enchiladas called, mineras, which were made for the miners. There's a huge mining industry in the state, and so they make them real hefty because
It's gotta last.
that was probably the only meal they had for the day. So we don't my mom doesn't make those fully like that here in Chicago, but when I go to Guanajuato, those are they're like the first thing that I need to do is, enchiladas mineras.
Nice. I'm gonna check that out since my people are from there and I'm hefty. Next is We call it a walk-up song. You could call it your pump-up song. You could call it your favorite, but think about when you're walking up to bat, the music's playing is representing you. It's also getting you pumped up as you walk up to bat. I need to know what that song is. There's an over and under of 50 that is Bad Bunny, but I digress.
Well, I immediately started thinking about, like, what songs we've used on the campaign because we have I mean, oof, that is hard. Um, okay, this is yeah, I know because you said Bad Bunny, but I think one of the things that has been really exciting about this campaign is the joy that people feel in, like, helping me get on the ballot, supporting me, but also feeling like they're a part of building the change that we wanna see. And we have all of these events where you just, like, feel the joy. And I would say, Bad Bunny Estamos Bien, because I think that song just, like, emanates joy. At the end of the day, like, we're good. Our community has communities back. And that's the feeling that I want people to walk away with after they come to knock on some doors or a fundraiser or any type of event we have. That joy of knowing communities got communities back and we're modeling the change we wanna see.
As you go out, I appreciate you being here today. Tell everybody again where they can go and donate to your campaign and why they should donate.
Alright, so you can go to voteformy.com as I are trying to raise $10,000 in the next 2 weeks to make sure that not only do I get on the ballot, but that I stay on the ballot because we anticipate some challenges to our petitions. So after having knocked on 30,000 doors and collecting, thousands of signatures, we wanna make sure that we stay on and give voters a choice in November.
I will take a personal point of privilege and say how proud I am to see you running, how proud I am to call you my friend. I think you're gonna do this. Follow her, watch her on social media, donate. But what I really need each of you to do is take her website, send it to 3 or 4 badass Latinas that you know who you thought that they may should run for Congress one day. They should be backing Mayra and her amazing campaign. Thank you again for being here today, and thank you for being a part of the Rocha Revolution. And until next week, y'all be good. That means you too, Christian. Bye.
Thank you. Bye, Chuck.